Luther is bigger this year. He's noticeably bigger, more muscular, a little bit more explosive. I would say, like added mass in his hamstrings, his thighs, in his arms. Like he just looks a little bit more physically opposing. And like I've been around guys like Deebo Samuel, who you look at their build and you're like, gosh, like that guy, that's what you want, like that powerful, explosive lower body. Luther has that.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Welcome to this week's edition of Mizzou That's Who here on KC Sports Network, your podcast for Missouri athletics here on KCSN. I'm Tucker Franklin, joined as always by Maggie Johnson, but this week we've got a very special guest. He is the ESPN draft analyst. He is Matt Miller, joining us after, spectating the Mizzou scrimmage. You tweeted out that you were out there, so you get a lot of inside knowledge on this team. We're going to talk about the NFL talent on this Missouri roster as we continue our Mizzou roster breakdown series. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing well. I've recovered from the heat at scrimmage that day. It's as we're recording, it's like I'm in a hoodie. It's raining outside in August. It's amazing. So it was great, though. I do want to say, because I will forget later, to Coach Drink and the entire Mizzou staff, like they roll out the red carpet. It was fantastic. It was a very, very hot day. They had the Gatorades, the waters, the tent with the fans. As someone who does not spend a lot of time outside because of my job, it was very much appreciated. So I know we'll talk a lot about the talent on the field, but I want to make sure and recognize that the entire staff, they did a great job of making it as comfortable as humanly possible that day.
Love that. Good. Maggie, how are you doing? I got to see you this week, actually.
I know.
All three of us were in the same building, and we didn't at the Royals-Cardinals games. Maggie made the trek from St. Louis. All three of us were in the same building as that game. The Cardinals did win, sadly. But
gotcha.
Because also she's Jack.
Whatever. We only won one of four. So disappointing.
I was going to point that out. So.
Yeah. Don't worry. I'll be self-deprecating enough. Okay. So, well, I'm a Mizzou fan. Is what we do. No, it was great. I had a blast. I went to the Missouri State Fair the next night because that's in my hometown. And I've never been to the State Fair. I know we were just talking about how hot it was at Mizzou camp. I've never been to the State Fair when it's been like 70 degrees and I'm in like a jacket. It's usually like 100. It was amazing. So I had a great weekend. It was awesome seeing you, Tucker. So yeah, it's been good time off since our last time I saw each other. We've seen each other virtually.
It's true. It's been a good time. As I mentioned earlier, Shaq did perform. DJ Diesel was there. Was quite an experience. Hilarious. It's legitimately hilarious. I love that they kept cutting to him on like the Jumbotron. He just had like a different kid on his shoulders. And it's like, what is happening? Like, this is very funny. Also, like just how massive of a human being Shaq is. He like made Salvador Perez look small. And like Salvador Perez is a good sized human being. He would probably make a lot of people look small, like these wide receivers on this Chiefs. I just went right into this.
Wow, wishful thinking. Wishful thinking.
I'm trying to get Luther Burden on the Chiefs, Matt. Is that going to happen? Probably not. But Luther Burden, pretty darn good football player.
Pretty good football player. And no, he will. I'm sorry, Chiefs fans. Barring something catastrophic happening to Patrick Mahomes, and we don't want that to happen, knock on wood. Luther Burden will be gone way before Kansas City thinks about drafting. I'll tell you my initial thought. So we're at practice. They're doing the warm up, and I'm looking down, writing in my notebook, and my son like taps me, and I look up, and here's Luther Burden jogging over to us, and he comes over, introduces himself, was like, "Thank you for coming to scrimmage today. We're gonna put on a show for you guys. Like, we're having a great time." My son's 10, so like they interact, and like Emmett knows like number 3 is really, really good, right? So it was just a cool moment of him to come over and take a second to do that. Very good PR by Coach Drink on that side of things. But also, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to watch any of the practices, but Luther is bigger this year. He's noticeably bigger, more muscular, a little bit more explosive. I would say, like added mass in his hamstrings, his thighs, in his arms. Like he just looks a little bit more physically opposing. And like I've been around guys like Deebo Samuel, who you look at their build and you're like, gosh, like that guy, that's what you want, like that powerful, explosive lower body. Luther has that. His route running, he looked, we didn't see a lot because obviously he's a Heisman candidate. He's a great player. He doesn't need an August scrimmage, but he made one play in the red zone where he just ran like a corner route and just out-muscled the DB for the ball. And I wrote in my notes, like, that's a play he doesn't make as a freshman. And it's maybe a play he doesn't even make last year. So to just see his development in person has been really, really fun to watch. I was at a practice last August, being at a practice this August. You can just see his growth as a player. And, now that he's like 20 years old, you can see he is starting to just develop more physically. So it's pretty exciting, all the things that he's able to do.
I've seen some of your mock drafts as of like right now, and obviously it's before the season, even starts. But I've seen him kind of, somewhere between number 1 and somewhere, between like number 8. What do you think that he would have to do this season to be closer in that top 5 range?
Yeah, the tough part, Maggie, is that receivers aren't drafted early. So there's some of that is just, we look at positional value. If you're not a quarterback, a left tackle, or a pass rusher, and really an outside pass rusher, your chances of going first overall are almost non-existent in the modern NFL. We could have a very deep conversation about the salary cap and how that's changing things, but I think Luther just has to build like he did, from freshman year where he was almost a gadget player. He had like 45 catches, a couple touchdowns, to last year where he emerged as this like true wide receiver 1, and he was really a total field weapon. I think it's just seeing more of that is really the key. From a physical standpoint, it's all there. We know he's fast, he's explosive, he's powerful. So really just doing more of the same. To me, he's my number 1 overall player in the class right now. Now, that doesn't always mean he'll be drafted first because of positional value, but he's the top player. He's by far the top wide receiver. And I think having the experience around him now with Brady Cook, knowing that he has Luther out there to just be his guy. And I think we saw that chemistry last year grow as soon as Luther came out. It was like, Brady's my guy. This is our quarterback. We saw that relationship take the next step. I would imagine this year there's going to be even more of that. So I'm looking forward to a productive year, obviously, but I don't think there's anything more that he really has to prove.
And you mentioned two in the draft class. It seems like there might be a bit more quarterbacks. This quarterback class seems a little bit up in the air as of now before the season starts, and that could obviously influence his position. And Luther's not the only guy in that wide receiver room that has pro aspirations. Look, Mizzou got Theo Weiss to come back for another year and play in this team. I mean, they got Mookie Cooper, who's a transfer from Ohio State, has played really well for Mizzou. He's also a senior. They've got a couple of guys in that room with Luther that have some pretty good NFL potential hopes.
Yeah, and those two guys looked really good. I think the cool thing is the way that they've structured this. With Theo, you have, the 6'2" guy who's going to go up and make plays above the rim. He's going to win on some of those 50-50 balls. Theo also came over and introduced himself to us. I don't want them to watch this, be like, hey, wait a second. So I got a chance to talk to him as well. But then I think with Mookie, you get some of that, underneath some of the, maybe like what Luther was doing his freshman year, some of the slip screen. Let's just get you the ball, kind of let you operate in space. So they have like a really good mixture there. And the cool thing is Luther and Mookie can both play inside or outside. Like you can move them around the formation and you're not losing anything. I'll mention, and Tucker, I text this to you, Mekhi Miller was getting a lot of run as the 4th wide receiver. And I mean, he was out there with the ones like consistently. So we saw a lot of 4 wide. And it is going to be fun to just see the ball in the air with these guys. When you don't have a Cody Schrader back there, I know we'll get to the running backs. When you don't have Cody back there, I do think we're going to see them rely on the pass a little bit more. You also don't have probably the dominant defense that we saw last year, where maybe you are going to have to score a little bit more now. So the 4 wide receivers, including Miller, all were really, really impressive. And it is nice because you almost have that, basketball team mentality with these guys with the size differential and the different skills they bring.
And you also see, like we've seen Luther catch the ball. He had 724 yards after catch last year, which is crazy. Yeah. But you see Theo, and you think of those 50-50 balls, right? You think of him getting those balls on the outside. He made some great catches in the game against Ohio State. But you don't think about things like the screen pass that he had in the Florida game where he ran for 77 yards. Yep. He's fast, too. And I think that kind of goes under the rug a little bit.
Oh, it definitely does. And I think, like, from a draft perspective, a player with Theo's build, you always kind of wonder, like, how fast are they? And a play like the Florida one is a great way to look at that and kind of judge that against, okay, he's thinly built. He's a long strider. Sometimes the speed of those guys does surprise you. So you try to, in my job at least, like verify that on tape of like, okay, I just watched him run away from DBs at Florida. You got to be pretty fast to do that. And I would say right now, it's like Luther is in a tier by himself. But if we're talking about who's the next best prospect at Mizzou before the season starts, it would be Theo. Like he would be the guy who is probably in that third or fourth round range right now if I had to put an early grade on it. But I do think year 2 in this offense, getting him to come back is big. I know the game against Oklahoma is one that I'm sure he's excited about. As a Texas fan, I'm excited to watch him against Oklahoma. So I think we'll see even, a bigger year for him now that he's just a little more comfortable.
Before we fully move on from wide receivers, you brought up Mekhi Miller. He is a junior. He is technically draft eligible. What do you think it would take this year for him to come out of the draft?
It would take a lot. I mean, it would take him like overtaking Theo as the wide receiver too, which I just don't see. The only I'm not trying to predict this. The only other thing that sometimes we see happen, guys, is where you have a senior quarterback like Brady Cook, and okay, well, he's leaving. Sometimes you'll see an exodus follow that. If some young guys don't want to stay and work with whoever the next quarterback is, or if there's ambiguity about who that quarterback's going to be, sometimes you'll see a flood of guys like LSU this past year. Jaden Daniels is graduating. Malik Neighbors was going to be an early pick, so we knew he was leaving. But Brian Thomas Jr., he goes ahead and leaves as well. And so sometimes you do see those receivers follow the quarterback, but I'd be shocked. I think it's more so keying him up to be the guy next year.
Yeah, I think that's good to go. Matt, I'm going to let you choose your position next on the offensive side of the ball. I'm going to let you choose your own adventure. Where do you want to go next?
Oh, wow.
Because they got a couple good transfer running backs in. They got some hogs on the offensive line. They got some big guys up there that are got some aspirations. Obviously, Brady Cook as well, if he could sneak into the back end of the draft. Where do you want to go before the break?
Let's go running back, because I think that's the position that there's the most intrigue as far as who's going to be the guy this year, because you are replacing the leading rusher in the SEC.
Yeah, that's a very great point. I think that a lot of times that goes under the radar. Like Cody Schrader had a pretty darn good year last year. Sometimes Missouri fans, or sometimes fans of not Missouri, will like to bring up that, oh, you guys are missing Cody Schrader this year, but leading into the season, they were like, well, you got a Division II running back. And like the goalposts keep moving. They bring in a couple Sun Belt running backs. They bring in Marcus Carroll from Georgia State, Nate Noel from App State. What did you think of those two guys out there?
Yeah, I mean, they're very different. It is the biggest thing. Like, you noticed that immediately. And, I think Nate is someone, just the shiftiness that he brings to the table is exciting. Like what he can do inside, outside the tackles, especially, as you're getting defenses back on their heels with this passing game a little bit. I think that's where his kind of slasher ability and the speed is a little bit more attractive, at least in my opinion. He catches the ball really well out of the backfield, at least based on what I saw at the scrimmage. And I think with Carroll, you're getting somebody that, not the biggest guy either, but he's like 20 or 25 pounds heavier than Nate. So you are getting somebody that can come in, bring the hammer a little bit more, is, I think, going to be primarily used, at least it looks like, as more of a trenches type runner. But you have really good balance in those two guys. And I wouldn't be shocked if we do see, close to a 50-50 split in terms of carries. But just based on, like, again, my 2-hour observation, I would say Nate looked to me like the better prospect, just because of, the size. He's going to probably be typecast a little bit as a third down back, but he definitely has the skills to be really good there.
I was going to ask, if you were going to take players right now that are in the NFL playing, maybe even starting, to compare these two running backs to, who would you use?
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw a Chiefs one out there because I know this will make Tucker happy, but I think Nate Noel could be that, like, Jerick McKinnon type guy, someone who is your number 2 back. You're going to use him a lot on third downs. Just try to get him the ball in space, whether it be, sweeps, outside runs, screen game, get him involved that way. With Carroll, it's tough. Off the top of my head, a guy with his, like, because a lot of times with comps, I try to think body type first and foremost. Maybe Damian Pierce, who's with the Houston Texans. Also somebody that, man, if you're just running, a power run scheme, a player like that's going to have a lot of success.
I like that a lot. I'll take both of those guys on the Missouri Titans.
Yeah, right? Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, if both those guys could show up, that'd be awesome to report for camp. But no, a lot of intrigue on this offensive side of the ball. Obviously, we got more positions to talk to before we even get to the defensive side of the ball. But first, we're going to have to take a break. And I got to tell you about our friends at Home Field Apparel. They're doing their Can't Miss Kickoff. The boxes are out. Make sure to go get them. They got some great designs from Missouri on the box as well. If you don't want the box, that's okay. You can just go get a regular t-shirt from homefieldapparel.com. Use the code Mizzou24 for 15% off of your first order. Homefieldapparel.com. We love them. They got more than just Mizzou. They've got every school that you could probably think of. They don't have Northwest Missouri State University Bearcats, but they do have Colorado School of Mines. So if you're into, and Slippery Rock. So if you're into the D2 football, they got you covered as well. So we're going to take a break. We'll be back talking more NFL prospects on this Missouri Tigers team right after this.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. Say bye-bye to overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at just $15 a month. Worried about losing your phone? You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all of your existing contacts. You can ditch the overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for just $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/KCSNMTW. That's mintmobile.com/KCSNMTW. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month with mintmobile.com/KCSNMTW. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Matt, I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off, and we're going to get to Brady Cook here. What does he have to do to become a draft pick in this draft?
I think he'll be drafted. I do. I mean, with Brady, it's, I've seen some players with a lot less ability and talent and production be drafted. I can name names if you guys want, but I don't want to, upset any fan bases today. I think with Brady, it's just like knowing who and what he is. He's going to be a second or third quarterback. Probably wouldn't throw 4 interceptions against the Dallas Cowboys if he had to play right now. That's for sure. So, the accuracy, the rhythm, like there are things that you like. The mobility is, it's not bad. He's not going to run for 1,000 yards, but he can move around in the pocket enough to make plays. So I've watched him. I've seen him in person a couple times. I've never watched him and thought, this guy's going to be drafted in the first round. I've also never watched him and thought, this is an undrafted free agent. Like, he is who he is. He'll be a really good QB2 in the NFL for a really long time. And like Chase Daniel did, there's a lot of money in that, and it sets you up well for the rest of your life. So I do think Brady will be drafted. And, he's a good quarterback. I think it's funny, before Brock Purdy became Brock Purdy, we would have looked at Brady Cook and been like, man, that's kind of like a Brock Purdy type dude. Just he's smart. The ball comes out clean. He gets in rhythm, and he can go on some hot streaks with his underneath accuracy, especially. I think his deep ball accuracy has gotten noticeably better in the last year. So before Brady became, the last pick in the draft and then started in a Super Bowl, or Brock Purdy, you would have said, like, okay, he can be that type of player. Now that comp would feel irresponsible, but I do think Brady has all the tools, to play in the NFL for a long time, and likely is a day 3 pick, but those picks absolutely matter.
Matt, I don't know if you know this, but here at Mizzou, we like to call ourselves backup QBU. So, we got Gabber, we got Chase Daniel, we got Drew Lock. We got what it takes to really get them backup quarterbacks in the league. But no, I like what you said. It's kind of crazy we're even talking about. I feel, in 2022, if you would have said in 2025, we're talking about Brady Cook getting drafted, people probably would have laughed in our face a little bit. But look what he's done. He's done exactly what he's needed to do to make his team be successful. And you're right. He's not going to run for 1,000 yards. But in 2022, when he needed to run, because let's just face it, he needed to run more in 2022. He had the ability to do so. He's very mobile. He's very agile. He he's quick. I mean, he's pretty fast. I think he had more yards in that game against Arkansas than Arkansas's total offense did. I mean, just him himself. So, no, I like everything that you said about him. I would love to see him drafted. I think him and his family, they're great people too. I think he'll be a great addition to any NFL team. I'm really excited to keep watching him grow this year, and I think he'll only continue to grow in the NFL.
I remember talking to Coach Strink about this a year ago. I know, at the time it was kind of, no one knew exactly who the quarterback was going to be. There was some uncertainty, or at least there was buzz that, it might be someone else. And I remember talking to him about it. He was like, well, we're going to roll with Brady. And we think that the best thing for him is experience. And the only way he's going to become the quarterback we think he can be is via experience. Now we're, 13 games deeper into his career and one more year of growth in this offense. So, I mean, the sky's the limit for him. The SEC, Tucker alluded to this quarterback class is all over the place. But in terms of production in the SEC, I mean, Brady can lead the SEC in passing yards, touchdowns. That wouldn't surprise me at all, especially with, some of the turnover we've seen at places like A&M, LSU. Texas lost its top 3 receivers and its leading tight end. So there's definitely room there. Georgia has never been a prolific throwing team under Kirby Smart. So I think you have to look at this as Brady could be the guy in December that we're talking about. I'm like, oh man, he threw for 4,200 yards and 40 touchdowns because they have that type of talent and that potential.
They really do. And you talk about some of the talent that really goes into that offensive line. Matt, when we were down at Offensive Line Masterminds, there's 3 guys down there that were soaking it all up. Marcus Bryant, Caden Green, Armand Membo, all 3 of those guys on there too. But they've got a pretty experienced offensive line. When you look at it, Marcus Bryant, the transfer, I believe from SMU, the grad transfer there, big human being. He's huge. Caden Green, the transfer, obviously from Oklahoma. Those 2 guys are going to be on the left side there. Connor Tolson's done a really good job of his development with this offensive line. Started off maybe not on the best of graces with Mizzou fans. Now he's one of those cornerstones that you really like on this offensive line. Cameron Johnson, the senior transfer last year from Houston, came over with the offensive line coach as well. And Amal Mimbo, obviously, coming in from Lee Summit North High School. A little bit of a Lee Summit North pipeline going on to Mizzou. That's what you love to see. But thoughts on the offensive line, some of those guys that you got to get your eyes on?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely talented. I think this year, obviously losing Foster is huge, so there's going to be a lot of pressure on Marcus Bryant to step in. He looks the part. I was, impressed with my interaction with him at Line Masterminds, and then seeing him in the scrimmage, you kind of get the 2 different, viewpoints of the player. Caden Green is exciting. He's just a sophomore, I believe. So, So it's like guys like that, I'm always hesitant to spend too much time on because I might actually be watching you for 3 years if I were to do that. So my biggest focus was Membo. And I think that, playing right tackle for Mizzou, he's a very, very good right tackle. He's a guard for me all day in the NFL, 6'3", 315. He's got to kick inside, but he's very draftable. Even right now as a junior, he would be draftable as a guard prospect. Just the movement is there. He has great grip strength. I mean, his ability to control guys in the play of attack is really, really impressive. So I know we're going to see him play tackle, and in the SEC, you're going to get battle tested quickly playing tackle. But that's going to only help his draft stock. So there's not that guy right now that you would say is none of them would be in my top 100 players if I were to build out a board right now. But I definitely think all 3, if we fast forward to January 17th and all 3 declare for the draft, all 3 are getting drafted. Absolutely.
So I know we'll get to defense, and we'll talk about Johnny Walker Jr. here soon, but Johnny Walker Jr. talked about Armand Membo, and he said what he said about him is he said, I think Armand is probably the best run blocker in the country. So I love going against him every day in practice. It's a challenge. And you love hearing that, especially from guys that you're going against, because I think if he can live up to that hype, if he keeps getting better, if he lives up to that hype, I mean, he has that opportunity to really move up.
Absolutely. Yeah, we saw that last year with guys like Fuaga from Oregon State. It's you start the year and people they've liked what you do, but I can remember tweeting in October of oh man, he could be a target for kind of like that San Francisco, Kansas City, and no, he ends up being drafted in the top 15. So I think there's players like that every year where you kind of fall in love with their power, especially in the run game. And then if you get an opportunity of something like the Shrine or the Senior Bowl to do that against, even better talent, it will your stock will shoot through the roof. So I do know in, kind of introductory conversations with scouts over the summer, he's the Missouri offensive lineman people are most excited about.
Interesting. Love that. Want him to kind of stay for another year, but
I know.
Right. He's only a junior, so we don't have to kick this guy out of here yet.
Right.
He's really good. He's really close with Caden Green. So you never know how relationships can work out as well. Like if he wants to stay and play another year, it can always depend on how the advice that he's getting from these NFL guys. If they're telling him that, maybe next year you could be a day tour, but hey, 2026 you could be a day one. So,
right.
It could just depend on all of that too.
I think it's time for us to flip to the defensive side of the ball. I think Johnny Walker's a great way to get to the defensive side of the ball. He is the Cotton Bowl defensive player of the game, defensive MVP of the Cotton Bowl game. He played really well. A guy who kind of takes over when you start to look at that defensive line. He's the returning guy on there. They've got a lot of defensive linemen. Darius Robinson last year was drafted by the Arizona Cardinals. Pretty good. He's off to a pretty good preseason too. He's going to be pretty all right. And Matt, you mentioned the Senior Bowl. That's where Darius Robinson his stock really took off. I think for a lot of people when he went to that Senior Bowl. Johnny Walker Jr., what do you like about him?
Well, I mean, the production, obviously, like you mentioned, what he did. I think even late last year, just showing up as that guy opposite D-Rob, where you knew he was going to get a lot of attention. Like, here's your opportunity. Athletically, it's there. He checks your boxes: height, length, speed. I love the way they're using him too, though. Like, let's really get him truly more out in space. Let him use that first step quickness. I think we're going to see a lot more of that 3-man front to where he is, just almost playing like a joker role in space. It's going to be really beneficial for his stock, especially the way the game's going. You have to have that almost wide 9 type rusher. That's exactly what he can be. So he is excited. To your point, so much was lost from last year's defense in the front 7 that someone has to step up. You also lose, Blake as a defensive coordinator. So it's going to be interesting to see early this year just how different everything does look. Because I think we know some of the names like the Christian Williams that are coming back, but it's like, what role are you being put in this year? And with so many transfers, 3 transfers probably will be starting on this defense.
Yeah.
Like someone needs to step up. But you mentioned that like Johnny could be that senior leader that kind of says, all right, this is how we do things. Get behind me and I'll lead you guys.
And that's exactly kind of what I'm expecting him to be. I think he made some questionable decisions in some big games last year that you don't like to see, but I think that those are things that they're learning. It's like a learning curve for him a little bit, and he had somebody like Darius Robinson to be a great leader for him, and I think that that's exactly what he's going to be for this next generation of defensive players that Mizzou's had to go get, because we did lose so many players last year.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think you even see that a little bit at scrimmage, like the defense looking for that guy that they're going to follow, because so much, you lose someone like KAD, who was such a huge part of the development at Mizzou and that transition from, being a team that was kind of an afterthought to being a team that can win 10 games and finish in the top 10. So my read of it was like the offense is ahead of the defense right now as far as that kind of chemistry and knowing who your leaders are. If that comes along, then they're going to be pretty dangerous.
Looking at the R Lads page here of this Missouri defense, they've got a lot of older guys. You're looking at a junior transfer, Zion Young. You mentioned Christian Williams. He's a senior. Chris McClellan, who's a transfer. Huge body, by the way. I saw a video of him. He is a large human being. I kind of startled of how big he is.
Yeah.
He's a junior. You're looking at the whole linebacker room is basically seniors. The back end, they've got some transfers in there too that are juniors, but a majority are juniors and seniors. They got a lot of age and a lot of experience on this defense. And traditionally, when we see college football teams have success at the level that they do, it's usually with those older guys. It's usually with those guys who have been around a minute. But I want to talk about Chris McClellan because I saw his name and I got excited because I think he looks like he has an NFL body, man.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And here's what's interesting, Tucker. After watching him at scrimmage, I go home and I have this database of like 1,600 players. Like basically any player that the NFL thinks is going to get drafted, he's not on there. Like, he's not on the database. So he might be one of those dudes. And I know he's only a junior, but we get asked every year in my job, like, who's somebody that could come out of nowhere and pop. And that might be my popular answer, just because we've seen how well, even going back to the Barry Odom days, how well Mizzou develops their defensive linemen. But McClellan does. He has that a little bit of a Byron Murphy build. I'm showing my Texas fandom here, but like that a little bit like stockier, but so powerful. So I am excited to see him break out, and the role that they're going to put him in is a really exciting one.
He's one of those players I don't know a lot about. I'm excited to learn more about him. And I think he's kind of like when Tyron Hopper came over from Florida, and you're just like, oh, you're excited because you get a player that was recruited to Florida. And Mizzou in the past, we weren't as much recruiting those same types of players.
Right.
And it was funny because when that happened, you saw Florida people being like, oh, well, Tyron Hopper just killed his draft chances. And then you just saw what happened. He got drafted in the top 100. And that's props to Mizzou because, Mizzou's killing the development game.
Yeah.
But you're hoping that that's a similar situation with Chris McClellan.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of these guys, and I think, for even someone like Zion Young, of all the players on defense that caught my eye most often at the scrimmage, it was Zion Young. Again, only a junior. But just sometimes guys like that, and this is how D-Rob was, like, your athletic movement is just so different. Like, you can tell, like, anyone could watch that defense play and be like, wait, number 9 just moves differently than everyone else does. So I do think, like, just like you're doing, Maggie, like, there's going to be a lot of people, like, new names, new faces. We're trying to figure out who some of these guys are. Some of them are going to be put in roles that have never been put in before. And even like Cody Schrader last year, to go from Truman State, no one was talking about him in the summer at all, and then you lead the SEC in rushing. So I think that's one of the cool things about college football now is that you can have those guys. You can have a Chris McKellen or a Zion Young or the corner Pride. It's like, okay, this guy transfers in, and you might become a household name pretty quickly.
I wanted to hit that second there before we let you go. You mentioned Toriano Pride. A guy that I really like is Dalen Carnell. And when I talked to Ennis Rakestraw and when I talked to Darius Robinson, we talked to them and said, hey, who's next? Who in that defense should we be keeping an eye on? Both of those guys brought up Dalen Carnell, of a guy that they really liked. JC was the same way. He really liked Dalen Carnell. Thoughts on that secondary? Because they got, as I mentioned, they got some juniors and some sophomores in there, but it's mainly older guys.
It is, and the one that stood out most during the scrimmage was Joe Charleston, the free safety. I know he had at least one pick, and this is like ones versus ones, so like it's live ball, it's real football. He was really impressive, and being a little bit more of a vocal leader, which you would expect as a fifth-year guy, but a fifth or sixth-year guy. But the secondary is the area where I had the most question marks headed in. I don't know who a lot of these guys are, because they're not on early scouting lists. Because it was Ennis and KAD, like there was so much was just those were the guys last year. So it'll definitely be an area where early in the year I'm still getting comfortable like with who those guys are and exactly what what they bring to the table. But Charleston was for sure, like for me it wasn't even like relatively close. He was the standout in the secondary during the scrimmage.
Wow.
That's good to hear because there were some question marks with Charleston, I felt like, last year. But I feel like linebackers and safety this year are kind of where we're struggling at corner because obviously we lost KAD and we lost Rakestraw, and they were, two of our best defenders. We're a little deeper at the safety position this year. I think like with someone like, with Dalen Carnell, who had a really good 2022, but when he came in, because he didn't start in 2022, but when he came in and started in 2023, I mean, he had 51 tackles, 6 for loss, 3 sacks, 7 pass deflections, 2 forced fumbles, and an interception, which was in the Tennessee game, and that was for a touchdown. He really just kind of came to his own. He plays that hybrid, star linebacker position, which not very common in the NFL, but I would say he'd probably do kind of what Carlisle did, where he'd probably be more of that that coverage linebacker position.
Absolutely. Or, nickel linebackers become such an important spot. And he has the body type for it. 6'2", 220. He could easily get up to 6'2", 225. And then you're talking about that's the size of a weak side linebacker in the NFL these days. So he has the build. And like you mentioned, I think he's clearly been most productive working kind of in that slot role as both a run defender, a coverage guy, but he'll be one of those guys like we're talking about with Johnny, where it's like someone has to kind of step up and be that leader in the absence of people like Hopper and with the absence of the two great corners who are now in the NFL. So the fact that, former teammates who spoke so highly of him is one of those things. As soon as we're done, I'll type it in my notes, because that's helpful for me to know of who players see as the next person that can kind of step into a leadership role.
It's been it's exciting. It's an exciting year for this Missouri football team. Ranked 11 in the AP poll. We didn't hit that off the top, but a lot of expectations, I think, for Missouri fans for them to be ranked right around there. But Matt, appreciate you hopping on here talking about the NFL talent. You can follow him on Twitter at NFL Draft Scout. Find his work on ESPN. Really appreciate you stopping by, Matt.
Yeah, of course. Go Royals. Sorry, Maggie. But that's I'm still in baseball mode. So I'll get in football mode August 24th. Still baseball season here.
Doesn't that feel good, though? It feels good.
It's been a minute.
Good and bad. Yeah, it's good and bad. I was telling my wife, I'm very excited for the season to start, but I also know what that means. That the next 9 months of my life are very different than the other 3 months out of the year. So I am excited though. And again, you have a talented team at Mizzou, and it should be a lot of fun to watch, especially the offense going early in the year.
August 29th, that first game against Murray State. I get them confused with McNeese State as well. I think we've gone through this on the podcast before. Very similar. Both FCS schools, both blue and yellow. Yeah. I don't know where their locations are. But also, I don't know if you guys have noticed this about SEC schedule. UMass and McNeese State are on every SEC non-con.
Yeah, poor UMass. I'm pretty sure they play Georgia and Auburn too, and I'm like, oh man, poor UMass.
Yeah, that's going to be fun though. Yeah, you got to give your backup some reps. It's fine.
You do. All right, that's going to do it for this week's edition of Mizzou. That's who. Appreciate everybody for watching along, listening along. We are on YouTube now, so appreciate you guys hanging out with us there. I'm Tucker Franklin for Maggie Johnson and Matt Miller. We will catch you guys next week with our season predictions. Make sure to stay tuned for that, and we will catch you next time.